Over the last couple of years, it seems as though the 80s neon aesthetic has taken over the world of media. Be it in TV, gaming, horror movies, or synthwave and city pop compilations, it seems like wherever you look, you're always seeing those unmistakable violet polygonal mountains, neon grid lines, and amber sunsets. And so, looking at the cover art of Hotline Miami, you wouldn't be out of place in assuming that it was just another entry in this well-worn aesthetic trend, just one more 80s throwback to add to the pile. But what you would be missing in this surface-level assumption is all that which is boiling beneath that surface. Created by programmer Jonathan Soderstrom and artist Dennis Wedden, the Hotline Miami duology follows the exploits of a handful of incredibly dangerous men, most of which have differing goals, but all of whom are united by their love for violence. It takes place in an alternate history America, a politically chaotic nation in a state of rapid decay. And marrying these narrative themes of chaos and violence is the game's vibrant art direction and visual design. Despite being fairly stripped down pixel art games, Hotline Miami 1 and 2 do a surprisingly good job at putting you, the player, in the headspace of a violent sociopath, and delivering an intensely psychological experience, with a hazy, dreamlike atmosphere, all while under the wing of its cool Miami Vice aesthetic. And so, without spoiling too much of the story, I want to look at how it accomplishes this. Welcome to Crafting Worlds, a new series in which we pay respect to the unique achievements of video game art direction and visual design. So, if you love gaming art, be sure to subscribe, as we have a near endless well of great works to explore. But with that out of the way, let's get into how Hotline Miami created its unique aesthetic experience. One concept that I want to get to right away is the idea of subjectivity and how it's visualized in this game. Without revealing too much, I'll just say that the story in this game is a bit of a mindfuck. Dream sequences are super common, the narrative is constantly firing back and forth across its timeline, and sometimes characters' stories and perspectives directly contradict one another. In short, it's never clear what is real and what isn't. And only adding to this is the game's many surreal effects, with the chaotic nature of these games perhaps being best visualized in the stage exteriors, as beyond the walls of the gang hideouts and discos is a kaleidoscopic void, a wasteland of evolving neon colors. A backdrop which not only contributes to the game's psychedelic feel, but among many other effects, operates as a psychological signifier of sorts, changing and adapting to match the character's internal viewpoint. Like in one stage where the backdrop gets intensely multicolored after the character's son gets blasted on drugs. Similar effects include one moment where you play as the pacifist, Evan Wright, who only knocks out and disarms his enemies out of self-defense. Sometimes though, something snaps in him and he begins to act out of pure bloodlust. And while this happens, a bloody red filter appears over the screen. Similarly, the very void flashes whenever you make a kill, like a visualized rush of adrenaline. And at the risk of looking too deeply into things, I love how the exterior environments seem to fade away into its nothingness, as if you're just viewing a memory from deep within the character's psyche. Just like with a memory, the immediate focus of the event comes through clear, but the details of the wider world beyond that isolated moment have melted away into obscurity. Similar effects include the retro VHS tape overlay, which intensifies in a scene where your character is dealing with major head trauma, making it an immersive tool rather than just a retro visual gimmick. And these effects are important to note, as the world of Hotline Miami is soaked in this kind of subjectivism. Whether you're in a dream or watching what is supposedly a canon scene take place, these sorts of visual oddities are almost always present, and they make both games play like a hazy drug trip. And you don't just need to look at the art to see this kind of subjectivity at play, as this is present on a writing level too, as the presence of directly contradictory scenes further hurts any notion of objective truth in this narrative. Granted, I wouldn't go so far as to suggest this game is completely devoid of truth, or go full game theory and claim that it's all just a dream or some shit. I do think there's objectivity to this story, but nevertheless, I like the mystery and surreal atmosphere these touches helped create. It's brain-distorting stuff. Not just an action thriller, Hotline Miami isn't far off from being a psychological horror series, with how it inserts you into the subjective, chaotic psyche of violent sociopaths. Speaking of, perhaps most central to the game's use of violence is its pixel art. In contrast to the smooth, mesmerizing menus and backdrops, the actual in-game visuals are blunt and really quite blocky and ugly. This is established the moment you press start in the first game, where you're treated to this ultra-scraggly, unflattering mug, one that sets the stage for what's to come, as the character portraits in this game are anything but attractive. They're crude and inhuman looking, often quite literally so, as they reveal only the characters in their animal masks, the game's signature motif. With their harsh, empty eye sockets, they conceal their wearer's humanity and shield them off from any empathy. Meanwhile, these other character portraits reveal all, showing faces in their most intense, primeval state. In contrast to the in-game sprites, which reveal practically nothing, because the game's camera is pointed straight down at a 90-degree angle towards the characters, what is maybe the most unnatural camera position possible. And while Hotline wasn't the first game to use this perspective, it did still go against the mold of 95% of other top-down shooters, which almost always cheated the characters and enemies out towards the player. And for good reason, because this, as an alternative, is really ugly, showcasing little more than the character's scalps and shoulders. And while I'm sure they went with this camera position for the sake of visual clarity, so as to not obstruct your view with walls, this decision does come with a very natural dissociative effect. Slaughtering hundreds of men in a shockingly brutal fashion is surprisingly easy in this game, as you're given next to no means of empathizing with these small, blocky little pixel men. Without their faces visible, these characters have next to no human qualities. As you start the game, they quickly become little more than dots on a screen that need to be taken out, as the game's visceral synth soundtrack pushes you on, destroying any sense of pity you may have had for these characters. And this complete lack of empathy that the game creates in you is very aggressively taken advantage of. Because for as casual as the brutal violence in this game may feel in the moment, that very quickly changes the moment you're treated to a close-up of one of your victims' broken faces. Because while these mugs may often be used to dehumanize and evoke disgust, due to their very intensely expressive, revealing nature, they just as often evoke extreme pity. And this was obviously very intentional. Notice how almost all of the kill scenes that are meant to evoke pity are done while the characters are on the floor, where their faces and expressions come in clear view. Just as before, this game is toying with your mind, here toying with your own sense of empathy. One moment it's visually putting you in the mind frame of a sociopath, one who views other humans as little more than targets, before ripping you out from that viewpoint and forcing you to watch the actions from your own sane, sympathetic perspective. That blasting fun music that plays while you're on a murdering spree suddenly disappears once there's no one left to kill, replaced with a cold, empty drone. The adrenaline in your system that once pushed you forward without question has vanished, and now you can only see your actions for what they were, a brutal and inhumane massacre, one that you created. These two games are not subtle. They're roller coaster rides of extreme contrasting emotions. Nothing ever stays relaxed or stagnant in these games, and I mean literally nothing. One thing that immediately struck me when I first played this game was how everything is constantly moving. The text on the menu screens, the characters bobbing heads, the constantly evolving and morphing colors of the backdrop. As you move your character, the very stage seems to shift and move around you irregularly. Subtly, it always seems to be twisting in an unnatural fashion, like you're drunk and struggling to find your balance. And it completely loses all stability when your character becomes feverish. Much like the mind of a lunatic or a wasted addict, nothing in this world is stagnant. It is pure chaos. Just like the game itself, as these are one-hit kill games. No matter how good you think you're doing, just one quick shot could suddenly end it all. Nothing here is certain or peaceful. The slow melodic rocking of the title screen, or the hazy level interludes, are cold comfort. As you know, they are only a calm before the storm. A brief window of peace in a volatile, destructive mind. You remember in the beginning, how I said you wouldn't be out of place in assuming that Hotline Miami was just another 80s homage? Well, to be honest, that was sort of my impression going in. Yet coming out, I was surprised at how many of its own ideas it was able to implement. This could have just been a fun action game, one that rested on the laurels of its spicy aesthetic, and that would have been perfectly fine. Yet it went above and beyond that, creating a unique psychological thriller, one that used all the aesthetic tools in its disposal, so that you could feel the chaos, delirium, and inhumanity of a psychotic. And for that reason, there's really nothing else quite like Hotline Miami. While it may have taken inspiration from some pretty obvious places, and may have been riding the wave of two up-and-coming trends, synthwave and the 2010s pixel art explosion, there's really never been anything quite like it. There are some movies and games that are similar, sure, but nothing that matches its unique blend of Miami Vice, crude pixel art, and psychological horror. And this is reflected in the game's wonderful fan art, which captures the series' unique look and feel perfectly. Developers Soderstrom and Whedon should be proud, and personally I can't wait to see what they do next. If it's only half as good, I'm sure it'll be worth the wait.